Geography baba sifundo sami esimnandi kunazo zonke.
Geography baba sifundo sami sonesimnandi nazo zonke. Geography wena umnandi nazo zonke. Geography baba sifundo sami esimnandi nazo zonke. Greetings, learners and colleagues. My name is Mr. UCN Khanyile, aka Awemah. I'm an educator at Sibusisiwe Comtech High School in Umbumbulu, which is situated south of Durban. Today's lesson will be on urban structure and pattern, but we'll be only covering the part 1 of it, which covers the urban profile, the street patterns, and the land use zones. So the next video will cover part 2, which is on models of a city, the factors affecting the city structure, and the changing urban patterns. So for today, let us only do part 1. So as I have said, urban structure and street patterns. Okay. So the first thing that we will cover is the urban profile. What is the urban profile? You must be in a position where you know how to define urban profile. So urban profile is simply defined as the side view of a city. So as you can see in this diagram, the side view of a city shows the height of the buildings. And I believe you can see what is happening to the site as you move from the center to the outskirts or to the periphery. The height decreases as you move away, and also the building density decreases also. Okay, so that is the urban profile. It's just the side view of the city. So it shows the height of the buildings. Okay, moving on to street patterns. So we have 3 types of street patterns. We have the grid pattern, we have the radial pattern, and we have the irregular pattern. So I have made a chart so that you can be able to identify these 3 street patterns. So this is the grid pattern. You can identify it by that the streets intersect at 90 degrees. So the streets are parallel and perpendicular to each other. We have the radial pattern. So simply think of the spider web. And we have the pattern that is referred to as irregular pattern. So what we're gonna do, we'll be looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of each pattern. Starting with the grid pattern, the pattern that has the roads that are intersecting at 90 degrees. So the advantage of that pattern is that it's easy to find a place, and also it can be converted to one-way roads or one-way streets. Think of those who are familiar with Durban. Think of the Smith Streets and the West Streets. Long time ago, there were two-way streets, but due to the traffic congestions that were experienced in the city, those roads were converted to one-way roads. But the disadvantages of this street pattern is that they are associated with traffic jam or traffic congestion. And also they are prone to accidents. And then finally, the disadvantage is that these kind of street patterns cannot be built on steep slopes. So they can only be built on the slopes that are gentle. So that was the grid pattern advantages and disadvantages. Moving to the radial pattern. So I said think of the spider web. The radial pattern have the roads that are leading or they are joining at the common point, which is the center, the CBD. So the advantage of that is that there is one point of joining, that all streets can lead to one point. That means there are many ways to the center. But the disadvantage, like the grid pattern, is that this pattern is associated with traffic congestion. The last street pattern that we have is the irregular pattern. As you can see, this pattern is irregular. There is no formal pattern of identifying this kind of street pattern. So looking at the advantages and disadvantages, the advantage of it is that there is easy flow of traffic, and also it's that it can be built on any topography, whether the topography is steep or gentle, but this kind of street pattern can be built anywhere. The disadvantage of it is that you can get lost easily, and also the road layout is unpredictable since the streets are not joining at right angles like the grid pattern, or joining at a common central point like the radial, but they're joining anyhow, so you can get lost easily. So the grid pattern usually is associated with the CBD and the low income residential areas. We're still going to cover the land use zones, and the irregular pattern is associated with high income in the rural urban fringe. Okay, so the last part, we've covered the urban profile, we've covered the street patterns. So the last part of this lesson is the land use zones. What is that? Land use zones. So they are defined as the areas in a settlement that have a specific function or that serve a specific purpose. We have 4 main land use zones. We have the CBD, Central Business Districts, at the center, as we saw in our urban profile. We have the CBD at the center. Right next to the CBD, we have the transition zone, followed by the residential areas, and then finally we have the rural urban fringe. Okay. Starting with the CBD, we're going to be looking at the function, the position, the land value, and the building style. So the function of the CBD, the main function is retail function. So when we talk about retail, we are talking about the selling of goods. So we are talking about shops like Spar, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, etc. So there's buying and selling of goods. Also, there are banking services and other kinds of financial services. So that's the main function of the CBD. The position, where is it situated? So we saw in our urban profile that it is situated at the center, as the name suggests, CBD, meaning Central Business Districts. The land value. So when you talk about the land value is the highest at the center. As you move away from the center, the land value decreases. So the CBD, it's where we find the most expensive land. The building style, which is the last characteristic, we are looking at buildings that are tall, as we have seen in our urban profile. And also, that is where we find the oldest and the newest buildings in the CBD. Moving to the next land use zone, which is the transition zone. I want us to look at this concept. Transition. Transition means change. So there are mixed functions in these land use zones. So where is it found? It's around the CBD. It surrounds the CBD. So since it's the land use zone that is right next to the CBD, that means also it has the highest land value. Also, since it is next to the CBD, as much as the land value is not as high as the CBD, but also it is fairly high there. You also find, as I said, it's a transition zone. There is mixture of functions. So there will be retail. You'll find the shops that are selling clothes. You'll find second-hand shops. And also, what is important for you to note is that in this area called transition zone, you find light industries. So industries that do not produce much pollution, like the carpentry or the car repair industries. Okay, and then finally, in this area, you find the buildings that are old and neglected. So this area is experiencing something that we call urban decay. That is why the other name for the transition zone is referred to as the zone of decay, or the zone of blight, or the twilight zone. Okay, moving to the next zone, which is the residential area. So residential area, as you can see in my table, I've divided it into 3 according to the incomes of people who stay there or who reside there. We have the high income residential area, we have the middle income residential area, and we have the low income residential area. So starting with the high income residential area, it's located in the outskirts, away from the CBD, because people who live there are well off. They don't mind traveling long distances, wasting petrol, going to the CBD. They can afford. So they are found in the outskirts. Also, we have the highest land value of all the residential areas. And the common street pattern that is found there is the irregular pattern. So we have variety of building styles. Since people who live in this area are rich, you can find different kinds of houses. The middle income is much closer to the city center. So the value of land there is the medium value. The street pattern that is normally found there is the grid pattern, and also the irregular pattern. So these 2 patterns, the irregular and the grid patterns, are the street patterns that are associated with the middle income, whereas the high income usually is the irregular pattern. And also here we have variety of building styles. And then the last residential area is the low income residential area. So as the name suggests, low income. That means people who are residing in this area are poor or are earning very low salaries. So it's near the industrial areas because they cannot afford to be situated next to the CBD because land value there is high. So since they are towards the outskirts of the city, that's where you find the lowest land value, and they can afford to buy or purchase sites there. And also the street pattern that is common there is the grid pattern. Usually you find the RDP houses there. Okay, so the buildings there are old and they are small and they are nucleated. Think of what? Think of Umlazi, think of Makuta, and all other low-income residential areas. And then finally, we're gonna do the last land use zone, which is the rural urban fringe. So as the name suggests, rural urban fringe. So we have the mixed functions here. We'll expect functions of the rural area and the functions of an urban area. So this kind of land use zone, usually you'll be asked to identify it even on paper too, on the map work. So what can help you to identify those this kind of land use zone? So you can identify it by things like sewage works. When you see sewage works, when you see airports, when you see recreational activities like the sports fields or the golf courses, when you see refuse dumps or market gardening. So those are found in a rural urban fringe because the land value there is very cheap. Okay, so also, as I've said, rural urban fringe, that means it's at the outskirts of the rural area. So also, the last point is that you find heavy industries in this land use zones. Industries like what? Like Hewlett's. Heavy industries are those industries that produce high pollution. So those industries cannot be situated near the CBD, very close to the CBD or where people are residing. So it has to be at the outskirts of the city. Also, thinking of sewage systems. Sewage systems are associated with a bad scent or bad smell. So those cannot be found where people reside. So they have to be at the outskirts of the city. So as we recap on what we did on this lesson, firstly, we looked at the urban profile. We said the urban profile is the side view of the city. So you see the height of the buildings. We looked at the street patterns. We said we have 3 street patterns. We have the grid pattern, we have the radial pattern, and we have the irregular pattern. And then finally, we looked at the land use zones. We said we have 4 main land use zones. At the center, we have the CBD. followed by the transition zone, followed by the residential area, and finally at the outskirts we have the rural urban fringe. That is all for today. My name is Mr. UCN Khanyile, aka Awemah. You can find me on Facebook. My Facebook page is Mr. Satu, SADTU, Mr. Satu, KZN-Awemah. So that's where you can find most of the information. And also, I'm available on Instagram as at Spawemah, SPHAWEMA. You can follow me there. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Spawemah. So that is all for today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.